Hey everybody, welcome back to the weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChainArgos. With me as usual every week, Jonathan Reiter, our CEO and Chief Data Scientist. Thank you for tuning in. Happy Easter weekend as it comes up. What are we going to talk about this week, John? We're going to talk about the Coinbase SEC lawsuit. This is an interesting thing for me. We'll get into that in a short while. We'll talk about Etherfi, which we tweeted about, which you guys may be or may not be interested to know a little bit more about. We'll give you those details in a minute. And then Munchables, and we're going to run through some data about Munchables. Munchables, not to be confused with Lunchables.
And they're hiring.
Which are delicious.
Hiring practices or hiring mistakes or hiring.
Interesting. It's just interesting stuff, and it's stuff that will help you to see, what's the value of looking at the economic value of transactions, so to speak. So first thing on the agenda is the Coinbase SEC lawsuit and the motion to dismiss, which was dismissed. So Coinbase put in a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, the SEC's lawsuit against them on several counts, several points of law, and the judge found that no, there's a real case to be tried here, so they dismissed their motion to dismiss. That just means that the litigation moves forward. Now, I'm a make-believe attorney, so why don't you explain to me, John, what the open source means, and I'll explain to you guys why this matters, because it's a common. It's widely known that lawyers tend to be, a little bit reticent with numbers, which is why we go to law school. So, we get away from numbers.
Matt Levine has written beautifully about this for years.
So the thing about programmable money is that that's where law and code and math and all the stuff that we're really fearful about, that's where those two collide. And because all this while, until fairly recently, law moved in parallel lines with computing. Their code software had its own laws and regulations, but it didn't generally spill over.
Well, and software was usually owned by a company that had a bunch of licenses, and the details of the software were really irrelevant.
That's right. Like, what's the underlying code? Is it open source? Is it decentralized? None of these things came out. So this is the first time, I guess, in history, you could say, where computing and law actually have implications.
Well, people are asserting properties of software means different things legally. It's unclear whether that will end up being the case or not.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
So
nobody's tried that before.
Explain to me what the concept of open source is.
Well, okay. Well, first, I think the Coinbase thing needs to be cut slightly in half. So the SEC alleged a whole bunch of stuff about securities, whatever, and the judge said, as far as the vast majority of that, they made a reasonable case. Calling them digital assets doesn't mean they can't be securities. That's a short and perhaps too cute summary, but that is, so this case can proceed. The one part that was dismissed is the claims that their wallet, the Coinbase wallet, was also offering broker-type services, and the judge did accept or say or rule whatever that, okay, fine, that part doesn't have to proceed. So whether that 10%, 5%, 20%, one of the smaller components. This is where the open source bit matters. So essentially Coinbase has said repeatedly, here's just some open source software we're providing to people. This is not a custodial system. This is just code we're giving people that they can run themselves with their own keys and do their own trading. And the court accepted that isn't plausibly something that could be a unregistered securities exchange or something related to violating those kinds of rules. Now, for the open source software bit. So Coinbase has asserted that this is a non-custodial system. Okay. The code for Coinbase Wallet is not open source. Right? Coinbase Wallet is built on top of an open source protocol, open source protocols, and uses an open source SDK, software development kit. But it is not, you cannot go build the Coinbase Wallet program yourself. You can build a wallet with the Coinbase Wallet SDK that acts probably very similar to Coinbase Wallet. Maybe if you build one of the demos that somebody put out there, using the SDK, it actually is the same code as Coinbase Wallet. We have no idea because Coinbase Wallet is not open source. Lots of software includes components that are open source. You buy a television and you look in the book, or in the old days book, and now it's usually, sometimes they're actually physically printed on the little leaflets that come in the box because they're required to print the licenses. Other cases, it's just the PDF you download. There's pages and pages of software licenses in the back that come from the open source software that's been used in the television. A lot of them run Linux or whatever, this kind of stuff. You see BSD licenses in game platforms. So there's open source software in there, but it's not open source itself because you cannot build the software as it stands. So I think the court has maybe accepted some arguments that it shouldn't have, or some arguments that conflated things they shouldn't have, or as Patrick suggested, lawyers are not software engineers, which they're not. That's not an assertion. That's a statement of fact about the world. So we don't actually know that Coinbase Wallet is not custodial. We're having to trust Coinbase to say that, and maybe it is. Maybe that's fine, but it'd be nice to have some evidence that that was actually the case, right? If it turns out that they do have, or at some time in the past had some kind of master override key control type stuff, then okay. Now people may be saying, but if I use Coinbase Wallet and I don't sign the stuff with my own private keys, they can't execute any transactions. Okay, fine. Still doesn't answer the question, because if after you've signed a transfer, Coinbase can do other stuff with that money, in some sense they have custody over it. Similarly, the degree to which they tell you exactly what transactions you're about to execute, it could claim to be going to one place and go to another. And again, it's transparent. You might be able to see afterwards it went to the wrong place, but that doesn't revoke where it went. Right? So this is the difference between being able to read and build the system yourself and simply being able to transparently observe the behaviors of the system. Those are not the same thing. If I watch someone stealing money from my house, they still stole the money from my house, even if I could see it through the glass sliding door in front. Transparency does not equate to something being completely open. It's interesting here because that's the one section that was dismissed on the basis of a claim Coinbase has made that, to my knowledge, there's no evidence submitted anywhere that this claim is actually true. It's just a bald assertion by Coinbase that, again, might be true, but it is not reasonable to say, if they're saying it's open source, that's untrue.
Yep.
If they're saying they don't have access to it and it's built on an open source SDK and they're trying to play a sleight of hand with language, that's concerning. If the court simply doesn't understand that asserting it's non-custodial absent any evidence isn't enough, that's concerning in a different way, I guess.
So, why this matters is that it shouldn't, because usually, simple thing to understand. If I write a novel on Microsoft Word, for instance, Microsoft does not own the copyright to what I've produced. They're not, it may be written on any kind of word processor, but that doesn't mean that they're in custody of my intellectual property. So the problem in this case is that by asserting that you're open source and creating this whole smoke and mirrors kind of thing and saying that we're not in charge, we're not responsible, we're not running a custodian, then you can make the argument that, because we're not non-custodial, we don't need any licenses, because we're not taking over, we're not running a money transmitter, we're not doing a lot of stuff for which you do actually need licenses for.
If Microsoft Word kept saying, I don't like this paragraph, I won't let you save the file till you delete it, right, then people would really question whether or not there was editorial control being exercised.
I'm not going to save this thing because it's got too many typos. Stuff like that. Then you'll know that the machines have taken over because the AI is just completely... Skynet is a real...
Yeah. Now, in the case of Word, we can observe that it doesn't do that. The code is not publicly available.
Yeah.
But they're not asserting that they sort of have no responsibility for stuff that's generated through the system. They're asserting that you're the one that generated it.
Yeah.
Right. Here, Coinbase is saying they have no ability to modify your transactions. Microsoft has never said they can't edit what you've written in Word. They certainly could modify Word to edit the content.
The AI does it all the time.
Yeah, they just aren't currently preventing you from doing current stuff. So it's a bit strange that Coinbase is saying we can't, when what they really mean is we don't, and that's a bit like a bank saying we don't steal your money, even though we obviously could.
And that's why banks have a whole bunch of licenses to prevent them from doing stuff like that.
That's right. So this stuff should need to be subject to the normal sorts of
Which is why this entire argument is so disingenuous, because that just shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. So anyway, let's...
saying you built your system with open source tools, but it's a closed source system, is every software system in the world. And if those aren't subject to standard securities rules, then lots of banks use lots of open source code on top of other stuff or underneath other stuff. Doesn't exempt anybody from any rules. So it is odd that this one, and I think we both suspect the reason this is being carved out is because there is an inadequate understanding of exactly what's going on here.
And presumably this will change as time goes on, and I don't know, but it's not uncommon.
Someone's going to get code to somebody's wallet they claimed was non-custodial and turns out to have been custodial.
Yeah.
And then this will get resolved.
So moving, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about Etherfi, which we tweeted about recently, and which has certain flavors of the Polygon stuff that we covered much earlier on.
Well, and it's a much earlier stage. So in this case, this is a rare case where we've found something and we're sort of telling people about it in real time, mostly because it is pretty amusing and there isn't necessarily anything nefarious going on here, although 99.9% some kind of mistakes occurred, whether they were genuine mistake that aren't really economically meaningful or intended bad behavior. Whatever.
I mean, TLDR, Etherfi is some kind of a staking thing.
Yeah.
Like a DeFi project, stuff like that. So all that bit's not so relevant. But what's more relevant is that they have, again, it's on the Binance website, if I recall.
So they launched their token, a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
And there's allocations for the token on the Binance post and on their own white paper.
Okay, so to begin with, their own white paper and the Binance page don't quite sync. There are some discrepancies between them. So it doesn't matter. Anyway. So let's just assume it doesn't matter which one you take. We ran through the amounts of the allocations, and I'll let you do the honors.
Okay, so as is normal. Okay, so this project has disclosed a large number of contracts and wallet addresses of various sorts in the documentation, which is nice. It's dozens and dozens of wallets, so that's a good thing. The wallets we're about to talk about, generally speaking, are not on that list. So as is often the case, the full amount of tokens that will ever exist, it's 1 billion in this case, were sent to a single wallet, minted from null to this wallet, and it's a multi-sig. This is a totally standard thing to do. That wallet is not on their disclosed list, and lots of projects work this way where there's a multi-sig that starts with all the tokens, unlock, whatever, and then wallet tokens are transferred out of that wallet that should be in accordance with the unlock schedule. It doesn't matter what the allocations are, the total amount of unlock over time, the initial allocation of tokens, and then incremental allocations of tokens. So we know what the full amount that was supposed to be available circulating at the beginning is, and the amount that came out of that wallet exceeded that amount. So the first thing you do is you say, where'd this money go? So if you look, there are transfers to a lot of addresses that match in amount different categories. Binance Launch Pool, there's a airdrop for users. The protocol's been running for a while. The token was launched later, so there's an airdrop. Those things match pretty closely. And then you find a collection of 70 million tokens sitting behind in a wallet that are not in the initial wallet, so they are free-floating in that sense, that exceed, the total amount wildly exceeds the circulating supply that's out there. And we're in a situation where, if I remember correctly, they're supposed to have 115 million tokens circulating, and they have, in fact, either about 97 million or about 170 million. If it's 97 million, it would be... And that gap is a single slug of 70 million tokens sitting in one wallet that, again, isn't on the list of disclosed wallets. So it's not like we found 97 of the 115 and it's all good. We didn't, because if you found the other tokens, you found 70, right? So your choices are way under the total and way over the total. It's not clear if this is an error or not, or what's intended to happen with these tokens. When last we looked, those tokens hadn't moved. In the Polygon situation, what we effectively found, published, way looking backwards, but was that these tokens sat there and then were eventually sent to an exchange and presumably sold, because the day they were sent to the exchange, the price started to drop. No one's alleging that's happened here, in part because the tokens haven't gone anywhere, but this allocation was not done correctly. And the most amusing part is the OKX bit. So some of the smaller token recipients deposited their tokens to OKX, which is fine. There's supposed to be some handouts to investors, advisors, team members, whatever. However, 1.5 million tokens came back in from OKX to the initial wallet that got the billion. So it looks like somebody got too many tokens, and an error was corrected by them returning those tokens after they were sent to OKX. Or maybe somebody's trading account on OKX bought the tokens and redeposited them to the project. We don't know. But nothing like that is disclosed anywhere. I don't actually recall ever seeing tokens sent into the initial whatever lock wallet ever before.
That's a new one.
It's oftentimes it's a contract, so if you sent them back in there, they would be gone forever.
Yeah.
It's a lock contract with fixed allocations out. So, they haven't responded to this point. We're not even alleging they did anything
we're not
wrong. I mean, the mistakes were made, but they were not big mistakes.
I think what we were asking is like, did we miss something? Like, care to explain? Maybe shed some light on this. Did we do something wrong? Did we miscalculate or something? We didn't.
In case anybody from Etherfi is... Well, there's very few flows here. It's not a complicated scenario. So the positive outcome here would be for them to say, yes, this is an error of some sort, and for the full balance of what are not supposed to be circulating tokens to be transferred into a real vesting contract that will release over time as per the schedule the amount of tokens that are supposed to come out whatever date. Standard, some of them are linear. It's a little bit complicated because they have some fixed amounts and they start on different dates, whatever. But there's an unlock schedule that's published. They could take the remaining 880 odd million tokens, and they could send them to a lock wallet and have them unlocked over time correctly, and then that'd be fantastic. You would have resolved the issue and made everything much better. As it stands, the bulk of the tokens that are not supposed to be circulating are sitting in some multi-sigs in amounts that don't correspond to the documentation. It's not ideal.
Promises made, maybe promises kept. We'll find out.
Promises were made. That's fair.
Yeah. So now we're going to move on to the final bit, which is Munchables. Not to Munchables. It sounds delicious, but it is not.
Munchables. Yes, so Munchables is a gaming protocol that apparently hired a North Korean developer by accident. I don't know that we have real confirmation this is a North Korean developer. I'm not sure how we would ever get such confirmation. I don't think they're going to update.
No, I've got Kim on speed also.
Well, that as may be. They have GitHub profiles, but I don't think they're going to change the location to Pyongyang. Who knows? Actually, maybe there's people in GitHub with location Pyongyang. I have no idea. Anyway, the allegation here is that this Munchables, this person or collection of developers that were hired are all really the same person. This is some ZachXBT analysis of their salary flows, all going to the same couple of addresses, deposit addresses. It looks like one developer, and then they, in the end, had the keys to the wallet with all the money in it, and they took the money. They have subsequently agreed to return the keys and the money back, and the whole thing has occurred. It also makes you question whether it's North Korea, because I'm not sure North Korea cares about their reputation as a developer in the community, so who knows what's really going on here. But it's interesting. So we looked. A number of addresses were identified as the addresses where this developer or developers were receiving their salary, and you could see inflows from other source addresses, which suggest that this developer had worked for other projects before. So what you're looking at here is inflows not from the Munchables addresses, but from other inflow addresses to the one of the exchange deposit payment addresses this guy was using. So each color is a different input source. So what you're going to see here, right, this looks very much like a job somebody had for 3.5 months, right? This looks like a job they had for 2 months. This looks like a job they had for 3 months. This is this purple thing was maybe an infrequent job. This looks like a job they had for 6 weeks, right? This looks like somebody that was taking, because if we look at, let's drill in here. If we drill into the data tables, this is an easier way for some people to see the stuff. This looks very much like, this looks like maybe some vaguely ad hoc salary, a month and a week, whatever, different sources. This guy was getting, this is pretty clearly a salary for 2 months, right? These payments. These look like regular payments for some kind of services. I click on, there we go. So this looks like they got paid for 3.5 months. Maybe this guy got paid for a month and a half. Here's a month's work of salary. This looks like an itinerant dev that we now know was, that's the way I interpret these flows, right? I spotted this when I was looking and saw this collection of flows and thought, come on, that's got to be 3.5 months salary. Right?
Yeah.
Why would you have those numbers? Similarly, that's got to be, right? So it looks like somebody that was taking a succession of dev jobs until they found one where they could plunder the treasury, which Look, I mean, it's a business model. It's a well thought out business model. This person was doing this on purpose. It suggests that maybe people should use tools like this to do due diligence on prospective dev hires. Because if you saw somebody with this pattern, no matter, you know how many jobs they told you they've had, you now know how many jobs their wallets have received salaries for. I'm sure somewhere there are people watching this this podcast that know what project that one is, or what project that one is, or whatever, right? Somebody is these addresses and making these payments. So you should probably check if somebody told you they had 2 more jobs and you see 6 different jobs for 6 weeks each. I mean, maybe not a great hiring situation. I mean, this is no issue with people who change jobs frequently. You hire however you want. But somebody that says they've had 3 jobs that's really had 9, and if you can identify who the projects are, you can ask people about them, right? There is actually transparency that can be used.
Or if they say that they've had 10 jobs, and then you look, and then they say that they've been receiving from this wallet, and they've only done 2.
Yeah.
That should also raise questions.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because this guy worked here for 3.5 months.
Yeah.
But if they claim to have worked there for a year, I mean, whatever. You can establish stuff.
You can
here
just,
that's in the
it's a bit like, when you go for an interview, and then the interviewer asks, what was your last drawn salary? You could kind of make it up, you could, and, but here, okay, you say that you did this and you got paid this much. Can I see your address so I
I
can
didn't even
check?
think about that. That's interesting. I did not even think about using it for that. Yeah, here I was more concerned with somebody that just seems to be, associated with a long succession of projects. But, yeah.
But this is, obviously, if you could have this in HR, if this was a real thing and everybody got paid in stables, this would be fantastic because you could really see how much somebody's last drawn salary was.
In some way, I mean, you can do obfuscation here. What does surprise me, and another reason I'm maybe not so sure this is really a North Korean developer, is that, this took about 2 minutes to put together. There's no obfuscation going on here.
Yeah,
so the operational security is pretty limited.
Yeah, they're generally better on their OPSEC.
So let's do better, North Korean developers.
So on that note, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching. If you're tuning in to us from Spotify, you didn't miss much on the charts, but you can always watch the last 10 minutes or so of the YouTube video. Thank you for your likes, comments, and subscribes. Keep your DMs coming in on our Twitter handle. We appreciate that as well. Otherwise, happy Easter weekend, everybody. We will see you again next Friday. Till then, bye-bye.